Is a grand civilization located in East Asia next to the Pacific Ocean. This location offered many advantages, like natural barriers in the forms of mountains and many rivers. They also had access to the ocean, but this setting also created disadvantages. Natural barriers locked them in, and mountains made traveling through the 7 warring states difficult.
China's past is very interesting. We will start at the Qin dynasty. The Qin dynasty brought peace and order to China by controlling the 7 warring states. The Qin dynasty followed a very strict way of thinking called legalism. Legalists believed in a strict law, order, and unity. When you did good things, you would receive a reward. If you did something wrong or unjust, then you would have to receive harsh punishment. This was enforced by the emperor of the time.
Emperors justified their rule with the mandate of heaven. The mandate of heaven is the belief that the emperor was appointed by God and is considered the son of God. If there are floods, rebellions, diseases, or famines, it is seen that God is angry at the emperor and it is time for him to step down.
The first emperor of the Qin dynasty was Shi Huangdi. He became emperor by claiming he was son of God and also used force and fear. He banished his mother and killed his father and stepbrothers.
Shi Huangdi used legalism to strengthen his power. He had all of the power and no one could have any say in the government. The emperor would force people to do laborious tasks or kill those who created conflict. Most of the solutions, though, were in many law and rules. The emperor had to perform rituals in order to maintain the relationship between heaven and earth. Although there was not much emphasis on religion, the people did believe in heaven, hence the mandate of heaven. The society had somewhat complex structure. The emperor was the ultimate ruler and controlled everything. They thought to strengthen their society, they would need to increase agricultural productivity and build up a large army.
Thus, the peasantry became the foundation of the Chinese state. Bureaucrats are very important because they represented their society. The higher class moved in carriages and wore robes with ribbons, seals, and headdresses to appropriate their ranking. Most officials came from wealthy families. Those who were wealthy meant they had lots of land. The majority of the population was peasants. They could barely survive due to their nature, their lifestyle, and the amount of land that they owned. They were required to pay taxes and were forced to do months of labor. Education was also seen as unimportant.
The people were uneducated but invented amazing things such as gunpowder, paper, moving print, a system of weights, measurements, and currency. They even had a written language. The art they used was moving print, but it was used exclusively for the emperor to paint his portrait to decorate his tomb. The Qin dynasty lasted for 15 years and collapsed in 206 BC. The government could not control the massive piece of land and rebel forces attacked more frequently.
After the Qin dynasty fell, a new dynasty took over, the Han dynasty. The Han dynasty lasted from 206 BCE to 220 CE. The first emperor was Wu Di. He too followed the mandate of heaven, except he was less strict. He believed emperors should keep taxes low, administer justice, and provide for the material needs of people. He created an imperial academy for potential officers in training. Here they taught history, literature, art, and mathematics. Around 30,000 students could attend this school. There were written exams to select officials. This test was your whole future. Only if you did well you could get a job in the government. This tradition still stands today. Usually only young men from wealthy families could afford the education to take these exams, but on occasion villagers could find the resources to sponsor smart sons, potentially putting them into the Chinese elite.
The social structure follows as so. State officials were the highest as they were educated and helped run the government. Merchants would be next because they are wealthy, but they are looked down upon, so they are at the bottom. They were seen as greedy and lazy. Plus, the state hated them. They would force them to pay loans that wouldn't be returned. At some points, they would completely ban them. Landlords are similar to the merchants because they too were looked down upon. They evaded taxes and had personal militaries. Landlords didn't do any work, but still got 2/3 of the profits. Peasants were at the bottom, but they were not looked down upon.
The Han Dynasty was based on Confucianism. Confucianism was created by a sage named Confucius. He believed that he had solved the problem of disorder in China. He spent too much of his life trying to get a government position to express his idea, but he couldn't. After his death, his students collected his teachings in a short book called the Analects. His solution to China's disorder was much different than the legalist answer. He believed that the moral example of superior was the Confucian key to be restored in social harmony. Confucius was about less law and punishment. Confucius thought that people would be shamed into living a moral and just life by the emperor, who featured all the good qualities. For Confucius, human society consisted of unequal relationships, such as father, son, husband, wife, older sibling, younger sibling, ruler, subject. Although Confucianism wasn't a religion, it was more of a way of thinking. Rituals and ceremonies were also important because they relieved the rules of behavior in different situations, although there was no mention of death or the afterlife.
Confucius believed that the superior party, or the one with the higher status, behaved with sincerity, benevolence, and genuine love and concern, then the inferior party would be motivated to respond with obedience. Confucius said the relation between superiors and inferiors is like that between the wind and the grass. The grass must bend when the wind blows across it. For the superior person or the gentleman, they had to have serious personal reflection and a willingness to strive continuously to perfect. Confucianism was very patriarchal. In fact, there was barely any mention of women or girls. These gendered concepts associated heaven with male and earth with female. There was one female author by the name of Ban Zhao who wrote Lessons for Women. She called greater attention for education for young girls, but not because of equality, but so they can better serve their husbands.
Confucian morality for ideal men were contained in the paired concepts of Wen and Wu. Wen referred to the refined qualities of rationality, scholarship, literacy, and artistic abilities, while Wu focused on physical and martial achievements.
While the Han Dynasty fell because of various reasons, such as it was too large and there were too many peasant rebellions, this very impactful and sustaining dynasty fell in 220 CE. Although it fell, Confucianism still lives on. It is a huge aspect in China still.
Now another major religion in China is Taoism. It was founded in 550 BCE. Although it was discovered much earlier, it became popular in 141 CE. It's associated with legendary figure Lao Tzu.
He wrote a short poetic volume, the Tao Te Ching, The Way and Its Power. One of the stories is that Lao Tzu vanished in the wilderness on his water buffalo. Taoist ideas were later expressed in a more understandable way by the philosopher Zhuang Zhi. It was very counterintuitive to Confucianism. Taoism believed that education, moral improvement, and good government was useless and artificial. This religion urged people to withdraw into the world of nature and encourage spontaneous, individualistic, and natural behavior. While Confucius focused on human relationships, Taoism believed in nature and its patterns. Confucius roams within society. Lao Tzu wanders beyond. That is a saying that is often said by the Chinese. The central concept of Taoism is the Tao. It is a notion that refers to the way of nature. According to the Tao Te Ching, the classical Chinese text, the Tao moves around and around, but does not on this count suffer. All life comes from it. I do not know its name, so I call it the Tao, and the way, and I rejoice in its power. Taoism invited people to withdraw from the political and social activism, to disengage from the public life, and to align themselves with nature and simplistic living. They also wanted self-sufficient communities, limited government, and no education. There was also active efforts at self-improvement.
Famous quote from the Tao Te Ching is, "Give up learning and put an end to your troubles." The element of hierarchy between genders was downplayed in order to have balance. This is somewhat based on ancient Chinese concept of yin and yang, which expressed a belief in the unity of opposites. Taoism shaped the culture of many people. Later, Taoism started to include magic, fortune-telling, and the search of immortality. Taoism had such a huge impact that it sometimes provided peasant uprisings, such as the Yellow Turban Rebellion. Buddhism is the last and final religion we will be talking about. Buddhism came to China through Central Asian traders, but received little attention from the rulers of the Han Dynasty. It only became popular after the Han Dynasty fell, when people felt lost and confused about the collapse. The Sui Dynasty Emperor Wen Di reunified China, and that's when the religion gained support.
Buddhism in China is not much different from the Buddhism in India. It shares the same basic concepts. A Prince Siddhargumta, who lived a sheltered life, then was shocked to the core when he found out about sickness, death, and bad things like that.
He went on a 6-year quest for nirvana, a state of perfect happiness. He achieved enlightenment at 35 and spent the rest of his life teaching what he learned. He says he teaches one thing: suffering and the end of suffering.
Buddhism in China is similar to the one widely known, there was a main difference. There was a specific kind of Buddha that was associated with China, the Chinese Maitreya Buddha.
Now for the essential question: how did religion support the undermine authority and social structures?
The mandate of heaven supported and undermined the authority and the social structure. It supported the authority because the emperor was the son of God, but it also undermined because there was any famines, floods, diseases, revolts. It is seen that God is angry at the emperor and the people are allowed to kick the emperor out.
Legalism supported the authority and the social structure because the emperor was allowed to have the ultimate power and everyone was beneath him. Confucianism supported the authority because the emperor was the gentleman, the guy who had all the morality and goodness. It also supported the social structure because it was based on meritocracy, meaning if you do well, you can move up and get a better job.
Taoism didn't support authority or social structure because it was believed that government was useless and unimportant. It didn't believe in social structure either. Buddhism didn't support authority or the social structure because everybody was equal and didn't seem to believe in government. China is the only civilization that has lasted up until today, and over the years have changed immensely.
China is one of the only civilizations that has lasted up until today, and over the years it has changed immensely.